have to be. Obviously, you know that when the result comes out, that there's a daunting task ahead of you. You also know that you've got a phenomenal leader that set a track record before, but you also know you were very lucky to be part of that team. I would imagine that every single candidate that put their hand up spent some time thinking about, you don't put your hand up not to get the job and not to win. So you put up your hand, you say you want to do this job, you put your plan together in such a way that you want to win. Then when you get it, then you put your plan in place along with the team to win, that at the end of the day the voters came out, made a decision, and for that I'm very grateful. The trust that's been put in me, and now I've got to take that trust, put it into programs and plans, put the right people in place so that over the next years that we build on the foundation that we've built in this province in the last 5 years. But I don't think that's a fair question. Obviously it was a competitive space. So there were a whole lot of us initially, then it was whittled down, then there were fewer and fewer until eventually, I suppose at the end of the day, the last three, and then I was the one that came out. I do know that in the discussions I had specifically with Bongi, that Bongi and I, whoever became the winner in that process, the other would support that person. And I will never forget when our leader said in the meeting that he called, he said, we've gone through a grueling process. Straight away in that, so it's in seconds of this announcement, things are going through your mind, and Bongi says, congratulations, Alan, I'm behind you, let's go and do this thing. It's a mixture of a whole lot of things. So, maybe I'm not as well known as Helen Ziller. Maybe it was people were upset about the water management. Maybe people were upset about infighting in the party. But maybe they were also buying into the global change in politics, in geopolitics. Because what happened in the UK with Brexit, or what happened in America with Trump, or what happens in South Africa where the votes are counted. We've got a resurgence of racial, we've got a resurgence of cultural, of religious, and of populist nationalism happening in our country right now. That's what's happening. People are moving away from the central, what we campaign on, one South Africa for all, that dream that was in place 25 years ago of this rainbow nation. Definitely. But definitely from the Freedom Front, definitely Al Jamaa, and good. And then going into those boxes, I hope we're going to ask them those questions, is what is it like being a racial nationalist party? Because that's what they campaigned on. That's democracy. That's the interesting thing in South Africa. People change their decision in voting for a whole lot of other reasons. And some of them might be because you've had a pothole outside your street for too long, or the refuse dump is in the wrong place. And others might be because somebody's put out some stuff on social media that's false or incorrect. And of course, that's the interesting ecosystem and environment we live in. So I think the basic fundamentals, which I believe should be exercising voters' rights, proved in this election that that's not actually what counts. But that also means that what we've got to do now within the DA on one side, but also within this government, is how do we counter that? And of course, voters are customers. And how are we going to put mechanisms in place that we actually make sure our customers are getting better services? The facts at the moment are South Africa has a constitution that says policing is managed in Pretoria. That's the fact. I believe it's wrong. And I will now put a plan in place to try and convince South Africa to change that. And so I will be speaking to other premiers, I'll be speaking to the president, we will be looking at constitutional legal spaces, because I believe that that's got to change. We need to change the management. 1,875 murders in 6 months in this province is unacceptable, out of control, and not being managed out of Pretoria. So South Africa has to ask themselves that question. They can say to me, no, we're not going to change it, we're going to leave it. Then I'm going to say, okay, well, what are you doing about fixing it? Because I've just lost another 1,800 residents in this province. They have been murdered. They've been killed. It shouldn't happen. Now, either we change the management system or you fix it. All I'm going to say to you is watch this space, because at the same time, I'm going to start working from underneath. I have to make this place safer. If I don't make it safer, we can't expand on education. We can't grow our economy. We can't put a job in every household if we don't make it safer. I mean, what kind of a place is this? That 1,875 people get murdered every 6 months. What is this? And whose job is it to fix that? So it all fits within that safety component. I think we've done a lot of work now with the alcohol game changer and learnings in the alcohol game changer space. Obviously, that would, that kind of work is not lost; it continues, and we've got to find that balance, because we've got the abuse side that is destroying society. That is really a big issue, and then we've also got the economic side of it. So it's the wine farms and the restaurants and the whatever else in tourism and in everyday life. So and how do we find a better balance so that the abuse is not causing the trouble that it's causing? I was absolutely in support of that, because schools have a lack of resource, and schools should be able to make decisions around fundraising and events on their premises after school hours, and that's what that enables. You know, in my hometown we have something called the Knysna Oyster Festival. The Knysna Oyster Festival happens on a piece of land that's got about a couple of rugby fields and some open hockey fields and some open space. That's where the Oyster Festival happens. That pulls in 75 to 100 million rand into that economy, which equates into thousands of jobs. In real terms, that Oyster Festival is not allowed to happen, because that's on a school property. And they have liquor in those events. They have the oyster competitions and they have wine tastings, and so that piece of legislation actually enabled that, or it enables a school to rent their hall out for a wedding. But the legislation enables the governing body to make a decision in their own policy. If the governing body says no, it's no. So the legislation is enabling. Of course, corruption is everywhere, and one would hope that a governing body, takes that into account. Obviously, we don't want corruption in governing bodies, but you want governing bodies to make decisions. At the moment, they cannot. It's illegal. They're not allowed to do that. Let that governing body make their decision. And governing bodies can come out publicly and say no at the school and advertise it. It's fine. And others can do the opposite. The school can't apply for a liquor license. So it's not about schools applying for liquor license, and you can't have that during school hours. Nothing says to me that we're not going to continue with what Kholiso was setting out to do. That's tourism and agri-processing. Now, those are outside of obviously some of that stuff happens in the city centre, but that predominantly is outside of the city centre. So people come shark cage diving, or go hiking in the mountains, or go and visit our little towns, or go out into the winelands, or tourism definitely enables jobs outside of the city, and so does agri-processing, enables jobs outside of the city. And I think also enabling for investment into our municipalities. Our municipalities, quite frankly, if we want to get it right, we're going to put, have a jobs war room. We're going to have the economy on steroids, and do whatever is necessary to create more and more jobs. That is my passion, and so we will be spending time and analysis on what we've done and what we have to do to take that to the next level. When you're a member of parliament or a member of party and you've got a constituency, you kind of focus on your constituency. So you know what happens in your constituency. As soon as you become the premier candidate, that's the whole province. So I've been to places that I would not normally go to, and I've seen both the good and the bad. I've seen the investment and what the investment is making, whether it's a new school or a sporting facility or whatever those things are on the one side versus, things that are where needs are. I was in some of these transition spaces in human settlements, where a transition space should be for a short period of time. I've seen places that people have been sitting in this place for 5 years, and it's probably going to be another 7 years before they get. If you've been in a place for 10 years, you are now settled. That's not transition. So how are we going to look at that differently? That's the kind of question I will be putting into that boodskap and bringing people in to say, guys, this is what I've seen. How are we going to be changing this? Obviously, and that's across the board, whether it's the drought stuff, the job stuff, the gangs and the drug stuff, you see it all over the place. And I think that's the one positive about a democracy and campaigning is you campaign on your track record and you've got a plan that you devised in a boardroom, but when you're campaigning, you actually understand to a far greater degree what the issues are on the ground. Understanding your weaknesses, and I think that's any politician's biggest issue, is are you able to understand where your strengths are? Are you able to cover with your weaknesses? And of course, I'm not an education specialist. I am not a health specialist. I've got an entrepreneurial background, but we need to make sure. I'm not a specialist on the built environment and how we get housing to be delivered better than anywhere else. Obviously, she's passionate about a number of her game changers. That's not advice. That's saying, please don't let these disappear. Keep the foundation that we've built and build on it. And it's not about what did she give me. I hope to be working with Helen into the future. I know she's the kind of person that when I've got to make some hectic decision, I can phone her at any time and say, listen, what did you do when you had to deal with this? And I think that's something else that we don't do enough of in politics is, and I hope that I make sure that I find the time to speak to past premiers and past MECs and because you need to you put your hand up and you take this job. You have got weaknesses. You have got areas that you know you're going to have to rely on other people to help you make those decisions. You've got colleagues that you've worked with for a long time. I say colleagues, actually friends that you've built friendships up, and of course in a cabinet, you build these relationships over time. You also know that you can't carry on with the same old because you need to do things differently. You also need to bring new blood and young blood in. Because you've got to build a future, because I'm not going to be there forever, and you've got to think beyond yourself. So it's tough. And so on the one side is the individuals. I think before you start aligning individuals, you've got to say these are what we've decided on in this campaign and our manifesto, and this is what we want to focus on. So that will definitely say, well, let's have a look at, do we change some departments, do we realign some departments? It's not easy, and of course then you're going to have to, once I've done it and finalized, then I'm going to have to speak to certain colleagues and say to them, I'd like you to continue, or I'd like to continue in a different portfolio, or I'm really sorry, but I am going to have to ask someone else to come into this post. And that's tough, but that's leadership.